Okay, time for the part 2 of the 10 best and 10 most useless evolutions in Pokemon. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll link it in the card and in the description below. And like I said last time, I'm only going over the 10 worst or 10 most useless evolutions because I haven't really found that big of an issue with the 10 best evolutions like Alakazam here. He's pretty good. But I do take issue with Octillery. Another situation where this girl didn't like a Pokemon simply for the idea that it looks different than its pre-evolution. And I'll get into that right now. This is one of those cases where I honestly have no idea what Nintendo Game Freak was thinking. More often than not, Pokemon are too similar when they evolve, and it's basically the same creature with a few embellishments. When it comes to Octillery, it's as if Nintendo Game Freak was like, fine, you want different, I'll show you different. Well, about Gyarados, but whatever. And then they made a fish into an octopus. It doesn't even make sense when you think about the animal kingdom. Maybe octopi aren't little fishy things that are tentacles. They are born tiny octopi, tentacles and all. Plus, there isn't even any color signals or anything else that says they are related. I get it with Feebas Milotic, as the point was an ugly duckling trope, but Remoraid and Octillery have absolutely nothing in common. The worst part is that it seems like Nintendo, Game Freak, gave up on octopi Pokemon altogether. I don't know why there's a question mark here. But whatever. Like, well, that didn't work. Let's ignore the animal and make another 4 dozen normal bird types. Okay, first off, Remoraid was based off a handgun. And Octillery is based off a tank. I mean, it definitely is weird, but I personally love this evolutionary line. I don't get it in the slightest. It's by far one of the weirdest evolutions out there, maybe the weirdest. But based on their design alone, the idea that like they're both based on type of weapons, it kind of works. It doesn't really make sense, like, you know, species-wise, because like you said, octopi and Remoras aren't anywhere near related at all, but it's still a cool concept. And I don't think it's because they didn't like how Octillery turned out. I don't think that's why they're not doing more octopi Pokemon. I think they just haven't necessarily thought of any more ideas of what they could really do with it. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm personally fine with it. Like, if they had another octopi Pokemon, sure. But like you said, they definitely do have way too many normal bird types, and I'll agree with that. But I personally feel like there are other Pokemon ideas that they should implement, like a dolphin, for instance. That's been wanted ever since Gen 2, but we haven't got one yet for some reason. But I can't really explain why I like Octillery so much. It's just so weird. I love it. Although, for the record, I do sometimes forget that Remoraid evolves into him. I honestly, sometimes just get it confused with thinking that Remoraid evolves into Mantine instead, because, Mantine has the Remoraid underneath his wings. But, yeah, I don't know. I can, to an extent see, why she wouldn't like Octillery, with the idea that it doesn't look anything like Remoraid. That makes sense. But you can't base your entire argument off that when you're analyzing why it's useless. A Pokemon being useless means it does absolutely nothing in battle. A choice Scarf Octillery is actually pretty good. 104 base special attack Hydro Pump, it's pretty strong. Now, granted, they're not that fast, so basically the only real option is a choice Scarf, but if you can make it work, then he's pretty good. But, yeah, I'll continue. Again, Sylveon, pretty good. Definitely one of the better fairy types out there. Yeah. Useless, Garbodor. How does Garbodor even work? One day Trashbag somehow becomes sentient? I don't know why this bothers me more than the ghost candle, but it really does. I'm pretty sure, like, Trubbish is, like, a mutated sludge and trash and stuff. Like, it doesn't necessarily work, but you're fine with Muck, who... Actually, you guess that later, but okay. It's also another case of a Q Pokemon Trubbish and its little bunny ears turning into a monstrous pile of garbage. In this case, literally. When I first caught Trubbish, I honestly thought he was a cute green bunny with his fangs. Grimer and Muck are bad in that sludge becomes larger sludge, but first gen evolutions can be a bit one note. In Generation 4, they really had no excuse. Generation 5. Garbodor came in Gen 5. Really? You're just gonna get that part wrong? But whatever. It does muck up, pun intended. Haha. The idea of Pokemon as natural or non-man-made. How can you have sentient human trash? Again, it's mutated trash. It just kind of is. I don't really like the idea of Garbodor either, but you're not a single time on this entire list have you talked about stats or abilities or really anything that would make a Pokemon useless. Like, if you had Slacking on this list, which I don't think she does, and called him useless for having Truant, sure, I could go along with that to an extent. Because having Truant not being able to attack every other turn is definitely not that great. But nothing about Garbodor's stats and abilities makes him necessarily useless in battle. Weak armor makes it that, when he gets hit physically, I think his speed increases when his defense decreases. That's pretty good. And now that Stench, I think, has a chance when you attack them directly, has a chance to flinch. So, using Body Slam, basically, you're pretty much guaranteed to either paralyze or flinch at this point. Not necessarily guaranteed, but like there's a pretty high chance one of those two things will happen, or both. So, saying that Garbodor is useless simply because you don't like the concept of the Pokemon, that's not how you should be basing these choices on. Again, if you had just said top 10 bad evolutions or top 10 worst evolutions, I could go along with it to an extent. I probably wouldn't even be making this video at this point. But you're saying they're useless, which Garbodor is not useless per se. I necessarily wouldn't use one just because I don't really like using poison types unless they're dual types. And Garbodor just, he doesn't really appeal to me battle-wise, but if I was given one of, say, Pokemon Showdown or something, and it had a pretty decent moveset, I could probably do stuff with it. So saying it's useless isn't necessarily right, just because you don't like its design. But whatever. Best Decidueye, which is actually kind of funny, because a lot of people aren't really happy with the way Decidueye turned out. They like the ghost grass type, but his stats are just a bit meh. Like, his attack and special attack are really close. It's like 107 and 100 special attack. 107 attack, 100 special attack. And then defenses are really good, and speed is only 70. So, just the way it's designed and its stats just don't really add up, but whatever. It's a really cool design. And considering how this chick doesn't really ever take stats or abilities into account, I could see why you think Decidueye is the best, one of the best evolutions. Useless Electrode. I can handle 3 Magnus and balls forming to create Magaton, and even 3 Diglets making a Dugtrio. Why? Why are you okay with 3 Diglets making a Dugtrio? And I personally feel like Dugtrio is the laziest evolution ever. Period. Bar none. It's literally 3 Digletts that are slightly bigger coming together. Moles don't do that as far as I know. Right? There's no, like, thing about moles clumping together in groups of 3 to stay warm or whatever. I don't really get, and like even with the whack-a-mole motif going, that doesn't make sense either. So I don't know why you're okay with that. It's whatever. But this was the epitome of laziness. Voltorb was bad enough, as it's just a Pokeball with eyes. But when it evolves, it just flips upside down but with smaller eyes and a bigger grin. Maybe they thought that throwing 3 Voltorb together wouldn't be clever enough. I highly doubt they ever considered throwing 3 Voltorb together. Just saying. I'm pretty sure they like the idea of, oh, it's a Pokeball. It's a Pokemon that looks like a Pokeball, and it, like, you know, tricks players into thinking that they're going to pick up an item, but it's a Pokemon instead. So they wanted to keep that going with an upside-down Pokeball. Like, it's not a good design per se, but I don't ever feel like they were ever going to put 3 together. They could have called it Voltrio. No, that would have been the 4th time in the Gen 1 alone that they put 3 Pokemon together. Dugtrio, Dodrio, Magneton. That they weren't going to do that. I have high confidence they weren't going to do that. The worst part about Electrode is the fact that these guys disguise themselves as items when you were wondering, then pop up and pop out when all you wanted was a Super Potion or a Revive. The worst part about their design is the whole reason why they were designed that way. Does that make sense to anyone else? They were designed specifically to be a trap for players. And you're going to say that that's the worst part about the Pokemon is why they were designed this way. So, if they didn't do that, what do you have as big of an issue with Electrode? Because if they didn't make Electrode, pop out as a trap for players like that, then there would literally be no reason to make Electrode or Voltorb look like a Pokeball in the first place. Right? So what exactly is your issue here? Granted, Electrode's design is kind of lazy. I will admit that. Voltorb is a bit lazy, but I get what they were going for. They wanted to keep the idea of it's a Pokeball, so they wanted it just, flipped upside down. It still looks like a Pokeball. I find that, it's not good per se, but it's fine in my opinion. Then they explode in your face and take out your leading Pokemon. It will explode if you try to catch it and if you try to run. The most annoying part is that it's not particularly strong unless it takes itself out. See, okay, I could take that. You finally mentioned the Pokemon's merits as a Pokemon, not just as the stigma around it or its design or something dumb like that. You actually finally mentioned the idea that, this Pokemon isn't really all that good as a battler. And it's really not. It's super fast for some reason, which I still don't really understand why. Maybe the idea that electrons move around the atom really fast, that's what they're going for. But yes, it's super fast, and its special attack is okay, but that's really all it has going for it. So, finally, we got to technically the number 3 worst evolution, and you're only now talking about his merits in battle. At least you finally got there, but whatever. So, yeah, Electrode, its design is fine. It could have been better, maybe, but for what it's doing, for what its gimmick is, it's fine. But yes, I will admit, as a Pokemon, it's not that great. Okay, there you go. Finally, something. Dragonite. Good stuff. Vandalox. Again, you're just going to complain about... this is one that... I don't know. I don't have as big of an issue with it as many people do. Which... I don't know why I don't have as big of an issue. Maybe I've just gotten so used to the idea of like Pokemon smashing together and being a new Pokemon, like, you know, from version like you said up there. Maybe I've just gotten so used to that idea I'm not really upset at it. Or maybe I could just rationalize the idea that, oh, people got the idea of ice cream from Vanilluxe, which is kind of contrived, but I kind of like it in a way, but I don't know. People are always complaining about new generation Pokemon. I have heard Gen 1 is the only one that matters, and I definitely have to disagree with that. And yeah, I'll agree with that. Gen 1ers are the worst part of the fanbase. It seems like Nintendo Game Freak was trying to go back to the roots when it came to Vanillush and its evolutions. I don't think you need that comment there, but whatever. Let's just add one more and make it goofier. A classic Gen 1 move. Then they added a straw. I mean, it was more clever than it turned from an ice cream cone to a bunch of icicles, but it's pretty ridiculous. Despite that, Vanillite and its evolution saved me in Black and White when it came to defeating dragon types. This was an age before fairy types, so dragons were pretty unstoppable unless you found an elusive ice type, and Vanillush was one of the few in Black and White. I'm not trying to pick on Black and White here, but it has some absolutely ridiculous and half-baked ideas, including the floating sundae that is Vanilluxe. Did I miss something here? You praise Vanillush for being a good Pokemon in Gen 5. So why do you have an issue with Vanilluxe? Because of the straw? Is that it? Just because of that straw? Which I could kind of see as, if we're going like a real world evolution, Vanillite evolving, like actually evolving throughout the years, maybe it, like, you know, people based ice cream off of Vanillite, so then when it evolved into its final form, it wanted to base its design off of actual, like, ice cream sundaes for people to like it better. Maybe? I don't know. I just feel like that makes sense to me personally. Maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, I don't really see what exactly your argument is here. He's clearly not useless because you liked Vanillite, or Vanillush. Vanilluxe? Vanillite. Yeah, okay, whatever. Vanillish. Sorry, this is Vanilluxe. Okay. For some reason I always, like, this is one of the few Pokemon I, like, don't necessarily remember their names all the time. Like, Vanilluxe, sure, but then Vanillish and then Vanillite, those two are, I don't know, like, sometimes forget their name. But how can you call Vanilluxe useless if you like its pre-evolutions in this gen? Right? I don't know. Again, it goes back to the idea that you're calling the thing useless, or calling all these Pokemon useless, when none of them has necessarily been useless yet. But whatever. Ampharos. A weird choice for being best, especially this high on the list, but whatever. I'm not going to get into that. And the number one most useless Pokemon evolution is Exeggutor. Okay, whatever. I will admit, I don't really understand why it has the ability Frisk, because Exeggutor Prime, or I don't even know what you should call it, but like, Exeggutor from Gen 1 has Chlorophyll, which makes it faster when the sun is up. But Alolan Exeggutor is so tall because it absorbs so much sunlight. So why doesn't it have Chlorophyll as well, or solar power even? Solar power would have been cool. But no, Frisk, which is honestly one of the worst abilities in the entire game. It just is. You get to see what the opponent's item is. Like, that's fine. But for the most part, you can just tell what their item is as soon as they use an attack. If, you know, they take a little bit of damage, then they're probably life orb. Most Pokemon generally only have just one or two items they use anyway, so Frisk isn't really all that great. They do have Harvest as a hidden ability, so there's that. I absolutely loved Pokemon Sun and Moon. I have both versions and have played hundreds of hours cumulatively. That being said, it's not a perfect game, and Alolan Exeggutor is proof of that. Nintendo Game Freak decided to take one of the most ill-conceived Pokemon chain, Execute being a bunch of eggs that turn into a palm tree, their seeds. They multiple times throughout the Pokédex entries and people in the games tell you that even though Execute looks like a bunch of eggs, it's actually a bunch of seeds. They just are. Just deal with it. And make it even more ridiculous. Most of the other Alolan forms have some design to them. Also with the intention of making these island forms more unique to their ecosystem. Grimer eats fruit, so it's colorful. And Raichu surfs, I guess. There was some... I think they just wanted to make Alolan Raichu. They wanted to make Alolan Raichu. And somewhere in the Pokédex it says, no one really knows why Alolan Raichu is like this. It just is. And I find that really funny. So yeah, even Game Freak doesn't really know why Raichu exists. It just kind of does. Then the Alolan Exeggutor makes sense, as the more sunlight meant it grew bigger. But then they seem to hastily add in the Dragon type, almost as an afterthought. Apart from that, he is literally no different besides the long neck and tail. He has one of the seed coconut things on the end of his tail. But so there's that. So he could, in theory, use attacks out of the tail too, which is, I think, kind of funny. Plus, the Pokédex says that the sun unlocks their dragon powers. It just seems to so thrown together and silly. Okay. I'll admit, I don't really necessarily understand why he's dragon type. I find it really funny. I find the entire concept of Alolan Exeggutor really funny. He's 35 feet tall, which is insane. Just Exeggutor, his neck grew huge, and that's it. And in the games, when you're using Exeggutor, its head goes off screen, which you can't even see it, which I find hilarious. But I personally am fine with it being dragon type, because Grass Psychic is actually tied for the worst typing. The only thing worse is Grass Ice, because they both have the most weaknesses. So giving it a different typing and also getting rid of its weakness to fire, not half bad in my opinion. Granted, you still have a large weakness to ice, but I don't know. I feel like Alolan Exeggutor, outside of having Frisk as your main ability, I still feel like you should fed Solar Power or Chlorophyll or something like that. But whatever. A Harvest Alolan Exeggutor is still pretty dang good. So I don't really know why you keep calling all these Pokemon useless. Just because you don't like the design and you don't like the idea that it was hastily thrown together with the Dragon type. Now, I don't know why it's a dragon. I feel like they just wanted to make him a Dragon type, which is fine with me. They just made Raichu a Psychic type, so why not? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a bit more forgiving than this girl is. That might just be it. But, I'm okay with it. I can't really explain why I'm okay with it, but yeah. So if anyone in the the last Pokemon is Gardevoir, which, again, a good evolution. If anyone in the comment section has any issues with any of the Pokemon, either in the last video or this one, please leave in the comment section down below. If you think that any of these Pokemon are actually good, or if you've used them in-game or online competitively and you think they're actually good and not useless at all, please tell me how you've used them. I would like to know that. This will probably be the last The Gamer list like this, because I've already done 2 bad evolution lists so far. So unless I see just a really, really bad one, then I'll talk about it. But for now, this should be it. I think I've had my fill of The Gamer articles. So yeah, until next time, see ya.